Welcome to Knock Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live from Kingsland, Texas, USA, with another episode of Controversial Issues with the most controversial rabbi on Knock Talk, Rabbi Chaim, the man, Coffman. Welcome back. Don't smoke crack, Rabbi.
Last time. Always a pleasure to be here. I think you said the introduction faster than I'm going to speak in about an hour.
It seems like I had somebody comment one time on because of that goofy introduction that I do sometimes about the don't smoke crack. Great advice, by the way. But somebody said, "Did you just tell the rabbi to not smoke crack?" Like, no, just being silly. So
break your back, step on your mother's back, right?
Right. On that note, however, I for the sake of the viewers, I'll try to take my intros a little bit more serious and not be so playful, I guess you could say. But yeah, so
that's why you can never look at me when you do it.
You make things very, very difficult. I'm just saying.
That's why I just look down at the ground, so we have no issue.
Absolutely. So we're going to go ahead and hit this again. This is going to be part 2 of Don't Go in the Way of the Gentiles. What? So we'll kind of see how this leads and take it away. It's all yours.
Pleasure to be here. As always, there may be a part 3. I'm not sure. I don't think so, but we'll see. We'll see how far we go with this. It's funny. Yesterday was Father's Day. You took off, as expected for Father's Day. But we spoke last week. You shouldn't have. So I guess you don't listen to the shows. Anyway, when your family doesn't listen to, or I have no weight what I say. Okay, that doesn't really matter. We're not gonna go there. As long as everyone enjoyed. If it wasn't forbidden, then that's good. If not, well, yeah, you only have yourselves to blame. What's the topic for this? We're going to hit 2 things. One, we're going to speak about music, right? Non-Jewish music, or maybe even we'll see about Jewish music. And then after we demolish that, we'll get into sports, and we'll see if that's where all that is holding. Now, in general, we have to remember, for Jews and non-Jews, that idolatry, right, certainly one of the Noahide laws, and it's forbidden to get benefits from anything from idolatry, right? Not a holy wafer, not any incense, everything is forbidden to get benefit from idolatry. If someone has idolatry, they want to get rid of it, they can't sell it, they have to destroy it, make sure no one is going to derive any benefit from it, etc. So it would be obvious with that introduction, should be obvious that you're not allowed to listen to music because if it's for the sake of idolatry, right? Church music, right, should be 100% forbidden because anything associated with idolatry, de facto has the status of idolatry, right? It'll be forbidden. It might not be idolatry itself, right? But the fact that it has a connection to it would make it forbidden. So therefore, it would be forbidden to listen or to sing any church melodies or songs. Let's say even from the book of Psalms that was written by none other than King David himself, which was orchestrated by the Christians for the sake of their deity. Now you're going to say, wait a minute, if the book of Psalms is written by King David, right? True prophecy over here, what he says. Then even if the Christians, the Muslims, anybody uses these verses for their own, for their own deity, why should that be forbidden for us? Right? Essentially, what do I care what they do? The problem is that, they worship something or, they put their ideas on something, whatever, right? As long as it's idolatry, it should be forbidden. Right? I'm not allowed to get any benefit from it unless they themselves annul it. They destroy it themselves. In other words, if they themselves, don't worship this, this idol anymore, right? They destroyed it or whatever the case is, then that idol, then that statue would not be forbidden. Right? It wouldn't necessarily be forbidden for Jews. Why? Because it's not idolatry anymore. Right? It's not just one person. Let's call a spade, right? It has to be universally denounced. If it's universally denounced, it's not idolatry anymore. right? So therefore a Jew could derive benefit seemingly from it. But let's say it's never been denounced, it's never been destroyed, something like that. There was a question, I think by the Aztecs. I think it's by the Aztecs or the Incas that, their society got wiped off the face of the map. I don't know if it was one of them or both of them. And essentially they left over, artifacts. What did they leave over? They left over idols, other things, right? So there was a question, would you be allowed to derive any benefit from it? So the question is, okay, the people that worship them have disappeared, right? Essentially, they've disappeared. Now, we don't know what happened, right? We know that they're no longer here. But we don't know if they stop worshiping the idols or not. So therefore, since it's be a Torah prohibition, and we have a doubt over here, we're going to be stringent, right? So something we don't know, that they have denounced, nullified their own gods, then it doesn't matter what I do, right? It doesn't matter what a Jew does over here. I can take my Louisville Slugger, I can, batter up, I can smack the heck out of it, I can kick it, I can deface it, I can do all kinds of things. It doesn't mean it's nullified. The ones worshiping it have to nullify it. If they don't nullify it, right, seemingly it keeps going on, then it doesn't matter, right? So their songs that they are going to sing, even from our prophets, right, even from King David himself, we're not allowed to sing those songs, right? Why not? Because they're using it for their own sake, i.e. the sake of their deity. Once it's for their God, that becomes forbidden. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean everything that they worship should be forbidden. If they worship, I don't know, they worship, Mount Everest. If they worship a mountain, is it forbidden? If I wanted to, which I wouldn't, but would it be forbidden for me to climb Mount Everest? Would it be forbidden for me to, I don't know, take rock samples from Mount Everest? And the answer would be no. Why? Because something that is natural, something that's part of nature, right, they can't necessarily forbid that everybody needs. If they worship a certain tree, right, that was the Asherah that the Torah talks about. They worshipped a certain tree. Underneath the tree, they put an idol, right? So that tree would be forbidden, right? But in general, there may be other things like a mountain, for instance. They can't, even if they worship the mountain, they can't forbid the whole mountain, right? So, again, if something that they worshiped was nullified by them, then I can derive benefit from it. Otherwise, then it would be forbidden, right? So if they sing these songs, in the book of Psalms, forbidden. All, church music, I remember I had to take a class since I was a humanities major, history major in college. So I had to take sociology courses and some other courses, etc. And two of those courses I had to take was music appreciation and art appreciation. Now, what's the first thing we learned by music appreciation? If my memory is still good, church music. We learned, right? I can't even tell you how exciting it was. The only thing worse, I had to memorize, Beethoven's Fifth. And I can't even listen to it till this day because I go going over and over and over, get the ups and downs and this and that, right? So in general, a person also has to be aware that singing or listening to music that has an inappropriate message, which is probably most music today, right? Most music today, 100%, it's going to have inappropriate messages. We're not just talking about gangsta rap over here, right? Most music has bad lyrics. Even, way back, you go back to the 60s, the lyrics are bad, right? You want to tell me they may be worse today? Could be. But in a lot of lyrics today, you have immorality, you have heresy, you have idolatry, certainly sexual stimulation. I don't think there's any question. All these music videos, etc. Certainly inappropriate words of speech. Now, someone would say, okay, so even if that is the case, what if I hum the tune? I don't sing the lyrics, right? So singing the lyrics, I understand that would be bad. Why is that going to be bad? Because it creates a bad nature within the person. What that does is it ignites an inclination. It ignites a negative inclination, right? Again, immorality, idolatry, sexual stimulation, all these things will have a negative effect. And it will create, you don't want to stimulate the evil inclination. You don't need to awaken him. He's doing a great job all by himself, right? But these things are very easy because, they throw images at us. There are videos. There are all these different things that 99% of it is all bad, right? It's all bad. We'll talk about, without words and, etc. But certainly, singing these words, certainly listening to such music, that is going to create, certainly a bad nature within the person, and it's going to ignite his inclination towards sin. Now, the Talmud states that Elisha ben Abuya, otherwise known as Acher, meaning the other one, Elisha ben Abuya was on the Sanhedrin, one of the great rabbis on the Sanhedrin, became a heretic, right? Eventually became a heretic. How did he become a heretic? So the Talmud tells us that he was drawn to heresy. How did he get drawn to heresy? Due to his singing the songs of the Greeks. Right? Imagine singing Homer's poetry. That sounds pretty appetizing, right? But he started singing, right? He enjoyed these songs that were, made up by the Greeks. So what did that do? That led him astray. I know somebody whose child, ended up going astray. Now, this is a little bit of a jump. He, got into music, started listening to music, but not just any music, right? What was talk radio? One of the first things, or one of the things they got very interested in, was none other than Howard Stern, right? Talking more than 30 years ago, right? Still, so you got to say, okay, so even back then he was pretty bad. So now you want to tell me, you started listening to that. You might have listened to other things, true? Right? You could have listened to other things. The fact that, he started listening to that was just a downward spiral, right? No different in many ways than Elisha ben Abuya, right? This guy's got a foul mouth, immorality, all kinds of things, right? That he's, perpetuating or whatever on his show. So therefore, it's a downward spiral, right? So same thing over here. You sing their songs, and you're going to say, well, the songs are innocent. I don't think so. I didn't grow up in Victorian England, as most people know, right? I grew up with plenty of bad songs, plenty of them, right? The lyrics are horrific in so many different ways, right? So that would be reason enough not to listen, to most things. Now, someone's going to ask, okay, what about music doesn't contain any appropriate words, right? Any inappropriate words or any forbidden messages? Let's say, I don't know, maybe it's Donnie and Marie, right? Remember Donnie and Marie, right? The husband, right? Maybe, it was pure, it was wholesome. Maybe, very good. No forbidden messages, no problems with lyrics, right? If that's the case, then it should be okay, right? It should be okay. You could sing it. You could listen to it, as long as, for a guy, he's not listening to a woman, right? Is it live or Memorex, right? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if it's pre-recorded. Doesn't matter. You don't know what the person looks like who sings it. There is such an opinion that if I didn't know what this woman looked like and she's singing, I could listen to her, right? But most rabbinical authorities don't hold to that opinion. The fact is, it's a woman's voice. A woman's voice is considered licentious. We're not allowed to listen to a woman's voice. A guy is not allowed to listen to a woman's voice, right? So therefore, as long as you don't have that issue, in this case, no forbidden messages, no forbidden lyrics, no problem, right? It should be okay. Nonetheless, Coffman's law would be that even though it's okay, right? Even though we would probably say it's okay, there certainly are people that are going to be stringent, not to listen to even permitted songs, of non-Jews, or maybe even of secular Jews. We're not going to discriminate here, because their words are just as bad, right? And certainly if they're not religious, no question, right? But even if it's permitted, even if it's permitted now, this may not necessarily be proven scientifically. As we mentioned many times, we don't really care what's proven by science or not. But at the end of the day, the singing of these songs, right, of these non-Jews could make someone a kindred soul. A kindred soul to this person, and therefore it could have a negative influence on the character. Now you're going to say, come on, I'm only listening to the music, right? Imagine you're listening to James Brown, right? You're listening to him scream, hey, all these different things, right? You're going to say, what, I'm really going to have a connection? I mean, okay, James Brown's been dead for a number of years, but you're going to tell me, you're going to have such a connection to his soul. I'm going to start, all of a sudden, I'm going to wake up in the morning, going to start rapping like no tomorrow, start yelling and screaming. I may start yelling and screaming anyway, right? But I'm going to have that kind of a connection. We're going to be kindred souls, so to speak. It's a little bit hard to say, right? But there is such an idea that when a person sings the song, right, whoever sings it, it's like you're attaching your soul to his soul or to her soul. What can that lead to? It can lead to negative influence, right? There are people that, way back when, there were people that were unbelievable followers of the Grateful Dead, right? What do they call them? Deadheads. There you go, from place to place. They hear them in concert. They didn't just enjoy the music, right? They went beyond enjoying the music, right? It was the culture, right? Anyone, grew up in the 60s, in that type of culture, that was already before my time, right? Okay, so it had to do with, immorality, had to do with drugs, other things. But what was the big part of it? Was music, right? So a person can have a connection, even if they never met the person in their life. They could have a connection to the music, to the person themselves, which can have a negative effect. And I think that goes without saying. You'll say people are, they're led astray. They may not be thinking so much. They get carried away. Most of these people are teenagers. They're older people also, right? I know some people, you might say, these are exceptions. People still into the Grateful Dead, still, going to some of their concerts with this, they're playing over the years, right? So you can still be into it. It doesn't matter, it doesn't matter what age, but it has an influence. Right, it definitely has an effect, right? A person could say, doesn't affect me. I just listen to the music. I'm not listening to anything else. I'm not having this effect on me. Could be, right? But there is certain music that does have and can have that negative effect, certainly on one's character. Now, so that's music with words. That's having your soul attached to their soul. What about a tune without words? Right? A tune without words or with other words, let's say. So, we mentioned before, it's forbidden to sing any tunes that are composed for the sake of idolatry. Now, what would happen if I decided, you know what? I really like the tune. I hate the words. The words are forbidden. So if the words are forbidden, let me change the words. Let me make up my own song, right? I'll make up my own song. I'll sanctify to God himself, right? I'll make up this great song, but it's the words that are composed for idolatry. That's what it is. The tune itself was for the sake of idolatry. If the tune is for the sake of idolatry, I come along and change the words. That's also no good. Right? So we'll take it one step further. What about Jewish music? Right? What about Jewish musicians that, what do? They take secular songs. They take secular songs and put religious music to it, right? Religious words to it, or tell different stories, whatever, but using secular music, right? Secular music, but they're sanctifying the secular music. So many rabbinical authorities hold that you shouldn't do it for exactly this reason, right? Even though it's not for the sake of idolatry, right? The secular music, let's say. But the fact is, the words are probably bad. What they're thinking about is probably bad. The whole thing is probably bad, as we mentioned. If that's the case, how does that help I put a Jewish theme to the words? I quote King David. I quote, Book of Ezekiel, whatever. I quote certain verses to that beat of a tune. So many rabbinical authorities, they can't do that, right? That is forbidden. Why? Because the source of where the music comes from, in my language, is treif, right? It comes from a bad source. So if it comes from a bad source, why am I using a Jewish theme from something that comes from a bad source? I didn't say it was idolatry. I didn't have to say it's idolatry. It could be bad words. It could have been immorality. It could be any number of things, right? But the tune itself, since that's what it is, that's what it represents, then even if I replace the words with a proper Jewish theme, then that should be a problem, right? That definitely should be a problem. There are rabbinical authorities, that are lenient, on that. If someone has a strong desire, right? Someone has a child that has a strong desire, for secular music, right? And you give them this music. So this music fulfills two things. One is, okay, they still enjoy the beats, right? Which we said is already problematic, but okay. But the second thing it does is it gives them a Jewish theme, right? So they won't know the original theme unless they look it up, right? They're not going to know the original words in general. So, okay. So if they would know it, anyway, there are a lot of Jewish groups that do that. There's the Maccabees came up with a song, it's called Bohemian Hanukkah, right? Instead of Bohemian Rhapsody, obviously, right? So they have a whole thing about, latkes and other things or whatever, but most Jewish kids grew up religious, don't know the original song, right? They don't know Queen's original song over there, okay, right? But it's a cute song, right? Anyone who's heard it, it's very well done. There's no question. There are many rabbinical authorities who say that's forbidden. It shouldn't be done, right? Because the song itself, even if you tell me the words from the original are not necessarily that bad, you don't use it. You don't put a Jewish theme to it, right? But if a person needs it, let's say a person's child needs it, better than them going to secular music, true, right? That is definitely true. So you give them something that is permitted. So this for them would be okay, right? Why would it be okay? Because again, there's a Jewish theme. Even if the music is what it is, doesn't matter. The fact it's a Jewish theme, it helps them. They're not going to go listen to other secular music, hopefully. Okay? So you kill two birds with one stone. If that is possible. If, like we said before, if the original tune contains inappropriate words or messages, and one is reminded of it when it is sung. There are a lot of songs out there in the Jewish world, even by Orthodox Jewish singers. If you grew up in the secular world, you know what the words are. You absolutely know what the words are. I've been to some weddings where they have some background music, before the bride and the groom come up, and whatever, you're paying attention, you're talking to people, and I was like, wait a minute, they just play Star Wars? Was that just Star Wars? Did I just hear right? Was that, whatever. And I've heard a number of times that, they have this background music, and some of it is secular music, right? Certainly secular music I recognize, right? So, that I would think is problematic. Not everyone's necessarily going to say it's forbidden because, again, they're using it, they're really sanctifying it in different ways. But what happens over here, you have this, Bohemian Hanukkah, right? So now, but the original words. See, I never know all the original words of any song, right? Maybe some of the words here, some of the words there. But imagine, I see this video, I'm listening to this music, and all of a sudden I remember some of the words. Right? I mean, some of the words I will remember, right? So if you remember some of the words, and it's even if you forget saying it, it reminds you of when it was sung. You know it in the vernacular, right? Then it's forbidden to sing even that tune alone, right? There are rabbinical authorities that will hold. It's also forbidden, because even if I'm listening to it, and it's a totally different message, and it's a holy message, that's great. But if I start singing the original words, or I even think the original words, that's problematic, right? That is definitely problematic. Other rabbinical authorities, as we mentioned, say it's okay if you transform them, into holiness. So that is the rabbinical leniency over here. Why? Because you see a lot of Orthodox singers, that's what they do. They take these secular tunes, and they put a Jewish theme to it. Other rabbinical authorities, as we mentioned, hold it's completely forbidden. That's it. It's a non-Jewish tune, right? There's nothing good's going to come out of it. Therefore, it's going to be forbidden, even if you don't sing the words, right? Even if the words over here are omitted. Now you're going to say, but I'm not thinking it. I'm not even thinking the words, right? But again, we understand there's an opinion to say you may think about it. You may even say these words, but even if you don't, even if you think about those words, that's going to be problematic. Again, why? Because you're thinking of these negative things, right? In general. Now, there are certain types of Hasidim that use certain non-Jewish march songs, right? Chabad sings Napoleon's March on various occasions, especially after the last service on Yom Kippur of all days, the holiest day of the year. The last service, Ne'ilah, they sing Napoleon's March. Now, you would tell me, isn't Napoleon pretty bad? Wasn't it the epitome of evil? Right? You could say, same would apply to the French anthem, which Hasidim began singing, many years ago as well. There, sometimes for the, some of the tunes, for the high holy days, in many places comes from these secular tunes, secular marches, etc. I mean, they are pretty ominous. It is pretty amazing. You hear the tune, it puts you in a certain frame of mind, right? But you're going to say, oh, but this person, Napoleon's pretty bad, right? No one's going to say he's a great guy. I mean, unless people close to him, whatever. But, he's the epitome of evil, right? Still, what did they do? Where did they find permissibility over here? They found permissibility because they elevated it. They elevated the holiness through people singing it, right? Certainly by Chabad, they've done that, with a number of tunes. People got really into it. People sang it, people danced, and this and that. So why would that be permitted in this case? It would be permitted for one very simple reason. They're using it for holiness. Now, other rabbinical authorities would say absolutely not, right? Since it comes from an unkosher place, no pun intended, since it comes from an unkosher place, that's it. It's forbidden, right? Doesn't matter how much you sanctify it. Doesn't matter how much you sing and dance. Doesn't matter if you put it to great tunes for Yom Kippur. You elevate it to the highest level. They're still going to say 100% it's going to be forbidden, right? That is going to be forbidden. Now, another issue is, what about young children? What about infants and singing lullabies? So you might say this thing that we're saying that's forbidden, maybe it only applies to kids that understand, right? Maybe it only applies to young adults and above, right? But this is also going to apply towards an infant, and a person has to be greatly, aware over here that even if an infant doesn't listen to forbidden music per se, it's going to have a negative effect, right? Imagine, you have an infant child and all they hear is negative secular music, right? They hear this negative music. Again, I'm not going to discriminate. Not, non-Jewish or Jewish, doesn't really matter. They hear this negative music. So we know that kids at a very young age, they pick up things very quickly. So even if the kid doesn't understand anything, they don't understand the words, but they hear the beats, right? They hear the beat, it affects them, right? Just like it will affect an adult, it affects them. Because the child's soul understands, he can understand the words and internalize them, which can have an effect when they're older. In other words, if you allow the evil inclination to enter, even at a very young age, even if the child doesn't really understand, later on it's going to affect them. Later on 100% is going to affect them, even if they don't understand it right now. Right now, this would only apply to lyrics that would be improper. Right? So that's not going to negate the singing of non-Jewish melodies that are used for lullabies, right? Lullabies seem to be okay, as long as I guess the words are clean, which they should be, and the message is good, right? I remember a while ago listening. You won't ask why I was doing this, but just listening to old lullabies. Not lullabies, like old songs I grew up with. Different songs when I was, I was taught when I was younger, right? Famous songs. Anyone can Google Clementine. If you Google the song Clementine, it's pretty depressing. There are a lot of, like those type of songs that were done in like the 1800s, the early 1900s, or something like that. The message is awful, but you don't think about the words, right? Because you're a kid, right? You don't think about the words. When you start getting older, you understand the words. Like, I can't believe I learned this as a kid, right? It's kind of like, if you're watching cartoons and you start asking questions on cartoons, that's when you already have to stop, right? I remember once, I'm not going to say how old I was, right? But I remember many, many years ago, watching a rerun of the Flintstones, right? So I always wondered, that there's an episode there about the volunteer fire department in Bedrock, right? So I thought about it, I was like, wow, it's an interesting idea, voluntary fire department, but everything's made out of stone. If everything's made out of stone, what do you need a fire department for? I was like, okay, I can't watch anymore, right? That's it. When you start asking those type of questions, you already know you're too old to start watching this. Doesn't mean it's not fun, right? In any case, as long as these lullabies are clean, then it should be all right, But nonetheless, there are rabbinical authorities that hold even by young children, right? Even singing lullabies forbidden, right? It should be forbidden because you don't know the effect. I mean, it could have a negative effect. Let's say better. It could have a negative effect, so they shouldn't sing these lullabies, right? But it is kind of funny that some of these older songs. I mean, way older songs. If you look at the lyrics, right? Forget about the tune. You look at the lyrics, you're like, I can't believe I heard this as a kid, right? They're gonna say, well, see, it didn't affect, right? For me, it didn't affect. But if you would think about it, and have a little bit of a brain, it's like, wow, this is, how could you give this to a kid to listen to? So there are many rabbinical authorities, again, that are gonna hold these type of lullabies should be forbidden, right? Just sing them Jewish lullabies, etc. So there's no issue, just while we're on this topic, there's no issue with listening, to a Jewish or kosher song that's played by a non-Jew, right? Non-Jew wants to play it, he's playing it in front of you. You can listen to it. That's not an issue. He can certainly play it at Jewish weddings, right? That, certainly also not an issue, right? But the issue is, again, if the lyrics are bad, if the message is bad, if there's immorality, etc. So there are a number of questions. One is, could a person listen to songs, of non-Jews that speak about God? Is it permissible to listen to songs that they speak about God? Now, it would be if they're speaking about our God. If there's if there's nothing inappropriate and it's not done for the sake of idolatry, right? That should be okay, right? If it's just a general praise of God or whatever, then okay. If I know it's for the sake of idolatry and the whole purpose they're singing this, this pure, pious song or whatever is for the sake of their God, not our God, then yeah, that would be, that would be forbidden. Now, what about classical music, right? That we didn't touch on. Or what I would call, I'm not a big fan necessarily of classical music, but that doesn't matter. When I hear classical music, I think I'm about to be drilled by a dentist, right? Or I think of elevator music. That's what I would call it in the vernacular. No offense to anyone who likes, classical music. So if the tune, again, is not composed for the sake of idolatry, then it should be listened. You can listen to it. Now, there is some classical music used for the church. Obviously, that would be forbidden. But there's also classical musicians that were rabid anti-Semites. So even if their music is absolutely beautiful and it makes someone feel like they're going to float on air, no pun intended, I think they can walk on water hearing this unbelievable music, but the person's a rabid anti-Semite. No, there are no lyrics over here. There's nothing bad right? Essentially, it's nothing bad. It's not for idolatry. There should be no issue over here. But what could be an issue? An issue could be if you know this person, like Wagner, was a rabid anti-Semite. Doesn't matter how great a musician he was. Why would I listen to him? Right? So what would somebody say? And this is going to be a good segue to the next topic, right? Why would I say that? I say that because you'd say, who cares? I don't care what his political views are, right? I don't care what he thinks about me or my nation and all that. I care how he plays the guitar. I care how he plays the oboe, the clarinet, whatever it is, right? That's all I care about. I don't care what he does in his personal life. None of that matters. To a Jew, it should matter because there is no such thing, as compartmentalization, right? We take the example of Aristotle. There was Aristotle, the great philosopher. But Aristotle also did other things, right? They were pretty bad. So the students caught him one day, say, how can you do this? Great Aristotle. He says, listen, there's a difference. There's Aristotle, the philosopher. There's Aristotle does other things, right? Within Judaism, no. You're the same person. We cannot compartmentalize, right? You have to say, what I'm doing is wrong. This is forbidden, right? Doesn't mean we always do the right thing, right? But you cannot say, okay, I do this one day, I can do this the next. Doesn't work like that, right? So even if I say, I don't care what they think, I don't care what they do. You got these actors, great actors, whatever. You enjoy watching them, but their political views could be horrific. What they think about Jews could be horrific. They say, so why listen to them? Why give them money? Because I like the way they act, right? I don't care what they have to say. It's irrelevant to me. Now, some people who are, much stronger Jewish, they're much more Jewishly inclined. They'll say, I'll never watch a movie by this person, right? I'll never watch Mel Gibson. Forget it, right? What do you think? This anti-Semite, I'm going to listen to him. I'm going to watch him, and all that. The list goes on. I'm not going to go through this whole laundry list, right? But in general, some people will say, I don't care. And it doesn't matter to me, right? I care what he does. I care how he acts. That's what I care about. Political views, what he thinks about Jews, doesn't matter, right? Totally irrelevant. Some people would say no. You can't have it both ways. So why do I say that's a good segue? Because the next topic, because that really ends this topic about, listening to classical music of Gentiles. But, one other point. I'm going to make one other point. And that is that you got a lot of Jewish music out there, by Orthodox singers, composers, etc. And they're using rock and roll. That's what they're using. They're not using old-time songs, per se. I mean, some, but not, not the vast majority. They're using music of today, right? So that would be the question, how are they allowed to do that? Why should we imitate the non-Jews, right? You should make up your own music. Make up your own tunes. Now, they'll say we do that. We have original tunes, right? We're not talking about ones that are, scamming off other people and just putting, a Jewish theme, right? But when you see some of these singers, they get up in concerts. I mean, not that I've seen it, right? But I've heard that, they get up in concerts and they're doing the same motions as these non-Jewish singers, right? They're doing the same gyrations and other things. I'm not saying everybody, right? But a lot of people, that's part of the culture. Right? It's kind of what they do, so to speak. But who says that's permitted? Right? You're imitating the non-Jews. You're going in the way of non-Jews. So you're going to say, I should just be out there singing? Yeah. If you're going to sing, sing. You have other people playing in the background, very good. But why are you doing all these different motions and all these different things? You see these videos, right? They're creative. I'm not going to say, they're not creative, and they're not funny, they're not interesting, etc. But the bottom line question is, should they be doing that? But you're going to say we're a very weak generation. People need that. They need to get up and sing and dance and should be fast and whatever. Okay. There are people that need it. That is true. But that also goes in the ways of the non-Jews at the same time. But again, there are leniencies. There are leniencies over here. So now, based on that, gets into a whole nother topic. Right, a whole nother topic we can spend the next hour on, which we won't, because I know you'll never give me the time, and that is about sports. Right? Now, we mentioned by singing and by songs and by listening, it can have a negative effect on my soul. So what about sports? Right? For a guy who's supposed to be learning if he's not working, what if he wastes his time, he goes to a ball game? Right? Now, forget about immorality, forget about cheerleaders, anything else. Let's say all that's not an issue. If all that's not an issue, what would be the prohibition? The only prohibition would be they're wasting time when they could have been learning. Right? And that prohibition is pretty severe. Right? We're not going to just poo-poo that, because the Jerusalem Talmud tells us that God can, look the other way, even on idolatry, on immorality, on murder, the big three that every Jew, doesn't apply to a non-Jew, that every Jew has to give up their life for, right, rather than give into it. But what does God not give in on? He won't give in on someone who had the opportunity to learn and he doesn't. So if a person had the opportunity to learn, instead he goes to a ball game, instead he watches a movie. Now let's say the movie's clean, which probably isn't, but let's say, it's relatively clean. There are no curse words, no immorality, no other issues. What's the worst transgression? Really, the worst transgression is they're wasting time, right? When they could have been learning. So you say, what if it's a woman? Woman doesn't have an obligation to learn. That's true. So for a woman, it may be permissible. But we have to always ask ourselves, whatever we do, whatever we see, before we see it, before we let our eyes see it, is this going to benefit me? Is this going to draw me closer? Or is it going to draw me further away from God? That's what we have to ask. So if you tell me, okay, it's not so bad. Oh, I'm just wasting time when I couldn't learn Torah, when I could have learned Torah. Okay, you forfeit your life, God says. But why is that not going in the way of the non-Jews? Right? The Mishnah in Avodah Zarah, Tractate of Avodah Zarah says, you're not allowed to go to the theater, to their coliseums. Right? The Rashi on the spot says, why not? You go to the Coliseum, what were they doing? They're killing people, throwing people to the lions, right? So thousands of years later, we call that roller derby, right? I don't know if there's still roller derby out there, or you can call it boxing. I mean, not someone's gonna die per se. Maybe maybe the UFC or whatever, etc. But according to the Talmud itself, right? This is not something that's new. The Talmud says forbidden. You're not allowed to. You're not allowed to go to their stadiums again. Rashi says you can't go there, see people getting murdered and all that. Okay. So let's say in these cases, not getting murdered, right? Just getting beaten up a lot, right? How many boxers, after their careers are over, they're finished. Brains are finished, right? So many blows to the head. We know what happened to Muhammad Ali, right? Once met him in Las Vegas. Happened to see him. Imagine seeing someone like, 6'4", and you're like 4'3", right? And he puts up his arms like he wants to box. I'm like, I'll take the 0 on that. But look what happened to him in his life, at the end of his life, right? So forget about whether it's permitted or not. That's a different issue. We spoke about that once. That's a different issue. The question is, if I only say it's a waste of time, right? It's only, it's only a waste of time. Am I getting good values here? Right? Do I see, sportsmanship? If I would say, okay, we'd see sportsmanship all the time, and, everyone's on the up and up, that's tremendous, right? You grow spiritually, in unbelievable ways, but what do people do? They trash talk. They curse each other. It's upmanship. It's all about beating the other person, not just beating the other person. Could be embarrassing the other person, etc. I would venture to say the values are probably not going to be that good, right? Certainly not that good. And if a person would meet many professional athletes today, I don't think they're going to be that impressed, right? We're not talking the cream of the crop of these people, who are road scholars. They just know how to throw a football. They know how to run with a football. They know how to shoot a basketball. Okay. Is it entertaining? 100%, right? If you're into sports. If you're not into sports, you can forget what I'm going to say for the next 20 minutes, right? But, if you're into sports, it's exciting. It's definitely exciting. Question is, what are the values? And a person will say, as that was a segue, person will say, I don't care what they do. I'm not interested in what they do in their private life. I want to see them hit a baseball. I want to see them throw a baseball. I want to see them, win a championship for my team. That's all I care about. I don't care about anything else. Right? But nobody should ever look up to these people unless they deserve really to be looked up to. Right? But I don't think a lot of them deserve to be in general. I'm not saying I've met 10,000 athletes, right? To say, why are you making a gross, overgeneralization? Maybe, right? Maybe that's true, right? But I've not seen the vast majority of these people are Rhodes Scholars. They're just not, right? There's nothing to do with discrimination, right? They're just not. But we see also what they get, some of them, what they get caught doing in the off season, right? And people could lose tremendous paydays, by sucker punching somebody. A woman gets caught on film, person never played football again, right? Someone else, whatever. I'm not going to go into this whole laundry list of what people do in the off season, right? Day after day, you hear different things. Shootings in strip clubs and other things. It's horrific. So these are not values. These are not values we want for ourselves. These are not values we want for our kids, right? But someone is going to say that it doesn't matter what they do. I don't really care what they do. I want to see them shoot a ball. And why should that be forbidden? This is fanaticism 101, 101A. Okay, a person goes to a stadium. Now, stadiums are filling up over here. And what do they have in stadiums? They have food, they have beer, right? They have alcohol there. So I can't imagine you're getting the greatest conversations, or you're hearing the greatest conversations from people. And you're going to say, okay, I tune it all out. It doesn't matter. I'm just there to watch the game, right? So that may be true, right? But don't forget, what did we say before? We said that when a person hears something, it affects the soul. Well, it affects the soul at a very young age. It can manifest itself later, right? Years later. It doesn't have to be a trauma at all. It could just be something, someone saw something that at their age never should have seen, right? Or heard, for that matter, but it had a tremendously negative effect later, right? It didn't affect them, it didn't affect them straight away. What we see today in the messages that we're getting from commercials, from, singers, from actors, it's all bad. It's all bad, right? I can't think of anything that's really good, at all. I mean, not that I'm necessarily looking for it, right? But 99% of it is bad. You wouldn't want your kid listening to this stuff, even though they may be, right? Because the values are bad. The values are skewed, right? It doesn't matter how great they sing. Doesn't matter how well they play the guitar. Doesn't matter how well they shoot a basketball. Why am I listening to them? Why? So you say, I'm not listening to them. I just want to see them play. Okay. But there are things a person's going to see that is going to have a negative effect. I'll give one example. Many years ago, probably more than 20 years ago, there was a famous basketball player, right? This famous basketball player got in an argument, I don't know, running for a loose ball, went into the stands, etc. I don't know, fan said something to him, back and forth. And what did he do? He spit on him. Right? His basketball player spit on him, but he missed. Right? Didn't have exactly the greatest aim. And he missed. And who did he spit on? A 4-year-old girl. Imagine. 4-year-old girl goes to a game. Maybe there's one of her favorite players. And she got spit on. Now you're going to say that's not the norm. Right? That doesn't normally happen. That's not even the point. That's not even the point. It doesn't normally happen. The fact that you could see something like that, you could hear what people say, etc. Who knows? You don't know who's there, and what conversations you could potentially hear or not. It's horrific. It has a negative effect, right? If it has a negative effect, why would I go there, right? But you're going to tell me because it's fun, because it's enjoyable. It's the thrill of the time. That's what it is, right? Anyone who's ever been to a great game, at the end of the game, goes to the wire, last second shot, field goal, this, that, your team wins or your team loses, whatever. It's, people are into it. People are very much into it. Comes along the Talmud and says, going to the Colosseums, forbidden, right? You're not going to get any good values there. That, forget about whether people are going to die there, and people are going to get killed there and all that. It's not even the point, right? That could have been the point way back when. You don't necessarily see that today. I mean, there are cases where, a boxer gets killed in the ring. It's rare. It can happen. It can happen. Or, someone gets brain damage or something happens. It certainly can happen. But you know what? That's what people want to see. People want to see two guys beat the heck out of each other and one guy win. That's what they want to see. Now, you're going to say, okay, 2,000 years ago, isn't that essentially what they did in the Colosseum? That was essentially what they did. Except there was worse in different ways. Because they took slaves or whatever and fed them to the lions. Right? It's not how long it would take for them to survive or not. So you're going to say that's worse. Well, but what's the difference? What essentially is the difference? Just say it's a big difference. It doesn't matter. Right? It doesn't matter. The values are bad. The values are bad. Things have not changed all that much, over the last 2,000 years. But the other issue is that people are very much into sports. Very much into sports, even if their team stinks. They're still into it. You see people in the middle of winter, going to football games, freezing, right? It's below zero, or maybe a little bit warmer. Okay, they're all dressed up. They have tailgate parties, all these things. It's freezing cold. So what will people say? That's self-determination. That's dedication. That's unbelievable. What would I say? You're an idiot. What are you doing out there in, 20 below zero weather, right? Or 10 degrees. It's cold, right? It's absolutely cold. People, in the stands, people in the stands in the winter. Comes to football, especially if your team is good, come the end of November, December, especially January, it's cold, right? It's ice cold. Doesn't stop people from going, right? If they have tickets and they're hot tickets, they'll go, right? Doesn't matter what the weather is, right? So again, some people say that's self-dedication, but people take it to the nth degree. People dress up, people put on, they color their skin, other things, dress up in the colors of the team. People are really into it, right? And I mean, I didn't, when I was younger, I wasn't into it necessarily like that, but, if sports is in your blood, it's really hard to get rid of, right? You got to fill it with a lot of Torah to have it have no effect, whatsoever. There's nostalgia there. It's, even if you don't remember, you don't know half the players and this and that, right? It still brings back memories. So a person will say, okay, so it's not all negative. If a person wants to be the best they can spiritually, right? And they're into this stuff, it's going to take away. That's what it's going to do. It's either I'm being drawn close to God or I'm going further away. There's nothing in between. That's why Maimonides, the Rambam, says in the 13 Principles of Faith, he says either God is absolute. If God is absolute, there's no one outside of him. God has no needs. He has the ability to reward and punish. If you don't believe that God is absolute, it's either you believe in that or you believe in idolatry. Now, idolatry does not necessarily mean I'm bowing down to an idol. It doesn't mean that, right? It can mean anything I give power to, right? Anything I waste my time with, that's more important than anything else, right? That's putting a value that doesn't exist. But people, I heard a story, during COVID when everything was shut down, right? There was no baseball, there was nothing, right? No one could go to anything. Couldn't even watch it on TV. People were going berserk. So someone told me they were so desperate, they watched Korean baseball. That sounds interesting. I said, maybe, there's roller derby. You can watch roller derby also, right? But if it's in the system and that's what a person enjoys, it means they have no connection to God at all. You can't have both, right? It doesn't, it doesn't exist, because when I push, when I go after physicality, when I do these things that have no connection to my soul at all, that are only going to take me further and further away from God, what you're doing is you're pushing God out. You're pushing him by the wayside. That's what happens. Now, on top of that, imagine all the great values you can get by going to a game, right? Now, again, depending on what the game is, it'll depend on the fans, right? There are some sports, more violent than others. So the fans are a different type of fans, right? Some are more finesse or whatever. Also different types of fans, right? But the bottom line is, and you have no idea what anyone's going to do, and their values are not our values. So even if you want to tell me the worst thing is maybe it's only a waste of time, and you want to say to me, okay, maybe there's not a problem with immorality. What about nivell peh? What about what people say, right? What about how they dress? Other things, right? A lot of other things. That is certainly going to be an issue. So a person will say, that's all irrelevant. What are you worried about? Why are you getting caught up in that? I only want to watch to see the person hit a ball or to shoot a ball. That's all I care about. I don't care about anything else. Right? But, imagine, we'll give one example. Right? We're running out of time here. We'll give one example. Imagine it's the bottom of the ninth. Right? It's the bottom of the ninth. Team's down 4-1. Bases are loaded. 3-2 counts. And the pitcher throws the ball little above the knees. And the guy said, that's for sure going to be a ball. Starts walking to first base. And what happens? The umpire said strike 3. Right? Game over. What does the person do? He's yelling. He's screaming. He's looking like an absolute fool. Right? So now, if we're thinking in God's mind, and what we're supposed to do to draw closer to God. You see this guy, remember Billy Martin many years ago, started like kicking dirt on the umpire, right? Started throwing grass at the umpire. Okay, this is a grown man, right? This is a grown man throwing a tantrum, right? You got someone, okay, they struck out. Maybe it was a bad call, maybe. And even if it was, so you're now cursing the umpire, right? Let's say it's the middle of the game, the umpire throws you out. Imagine how many more curses he's going to get. Right? How many transgressions can we see in one shot? Right? But baseball is a family game. Total family game. You're going to say you don't see that often. You see it enough. Right? I would think you see it enough. Right? And you can hear it from the screen as well. Even if you're not there. So bottom line is the values aren't good. Right? In general. So if the values aren't good, don't you think it may have a negative effect on you? Could be. Right? Could very well be, as we said before. Right? And as we mentioned, even by songs, even if I don't sing the words, but I think the words, it's also bad. Right? So what if I have the sound on? This guy's cursing someone. I can't hear him swearing. Right? They don't put the microphone that close. Right? Or if they did, they'll blurt it out. So you won't hear it. Right? But imagine, let's say you can't hear it. Right, but you can read lips. So now you know this guy's cursing. 100% he's cursing. So what happens? You start to think of the curse words also. It has nothing to do with you. You're not involved. You're not involved at all, but you get caught up. You get caught up in it. But if you see somebody like that, doesn't matter how great a player he is, could be the best player of all time and all that, and he's acting like a 2-year-old on the field. Right? He's cursing out the umpire. He's cursing out the pitcher. He's throwing a tantrum over there, etc. Breaks his bat, wants to show how strong he is, gets so upset he breaks his bat. Isn't someone who's angry or loses himself in anger? Don't we hold the Talmud says that's idolatry? Right? Someone who does that's idolatry. Right? So that's pretty bad. So again, these values are going to be bad. You want to tell me there are a couple values that may actually be good? That's like saying in general, that's like saying, I can watch a lot of great Torah classes on the internet. Okay, right? That may very well be true. But even if that is true, how much of the internet is really bad considered to the amount of classes you're watching in Torah? 80%? 90%? Am I getting close? Right? It's a high percentage that's bad. You say you have to find it. Not necessarily. You can have the best, pop-up blocker and still stuff gets in. Right? We're not 100% immune over here. If you would tell me that would be the case, great. Then you never see this stuff. You never go on these other things. You can't get on to other things. Tremendous. Right? But at the end of the day, it is true. There is a lot of Torah. There's a lot of good Torah. Right? That's on, that's certainly on the internet. A lot of bad Torah also. Right? But there's so many other things. Person can just click here, click there, click the other place. Right? And it's like someone told me, oh, you think watching TV is so bad? There's a History Channel. I can watch Doctor Who. I don't even know if he's still on. right? I can watch the History Channel. I said, okay, how many times this week did you watch the History Channel? 0. How many times you ever watch the History Channel? 0. Right? So that's not an issue. Right? It's just something to throw out there. You can say, oh, I'm going to make them look bad. Right? I could, learn this. I could learn that, but no one ever does. Right? If it's a choice of the History Channel or watching a movie, you're going to watch a movie or a sporting event or something else. Right? That's what people do. They just surfing and surfing and surfing. You see all this garbage. But there is good stuff there. True. There 100% is good stuff. But let's say a person's a news junkie. All he says spends all day on the news. Also bad. Right? Anything, the point is, anything that takes you away from Torah, and that, in a negative way, because it's not going to be positive, that is going to be considered idolatry. Doesn't mean you're bowing down to idols. Right? That's what we have to keep in mind over here. Because, again, the values are going to be bad. Even if some of them are good. We'll say some of them are good. I'll go on record. We'll say some of them are good. Okay? Right? The vast majority are bad, so it doesn't matter. Right? You throw everything out because you can't say, I'm only going to listen to the good. You're not in control. Right? We're totally not in control. Is it fun? It's enjoyable. Right? Especially if your team's winning. A lot. So great! Right? And even if your team's not winning, you're still into it anyway. Right? There are a lot of people spend millions of dollars, in all these things. For what? To watch someone hit a ball. To see someone shoot a basket. People are into it. And it sells. And they make tons of money if you're in a big market. Make tons of money. It's unbelievable. Right? We deserve a little bit of a raise over here. We're trying to bring souls up, not trying to show how well I can shoot a basketball. I mean, if I had a 40-inch vertical leap, I wouldn't be doing Tanakh Talk right now. I would have been world famous years ago, but I don't. I stopped growing. Everyone else grew bigger than me. That's what happened. Right? So I retired at a young age. But that is, that's what I would say. That's what I would say on that.
Good deal. I was going to say
you're not giving me one more minute.
I know, right? Isn't that such a horrible thing? Wow. Thank you guys for tuning in. It's been fun. Rabbi, we'll look forward to next week. I guess we're going to have another continuation next week, I reckon.
I don't know. I mean,
okay.
I sort of finished it, but
right.
I might find.
Well, the concept of the things that are forbidden versus the things that are it's not necessarily forbidden, but not good for you.
There's a lot of things that are let's say I would say are more moral issues than actually being forbidden, which no one ever wants to hear anyway because okay, it's not really forbidden. But are you better off doing it or not?
Right. That's kind of what
you better or not.
That's probably how we're going to run next week. Is we'll probably hit it from that angle and just kind of discuss the variable things, and maybe we'll keep an eye open on chat and see if anybody has any comments to kind of throw into that topic, and if so, then I'll bring them up a little bit as we go along, and we'll see how it plays out. Okay.
Sounds like a plan.
All right. Peace, everybody. Thank you. Have a great week. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Turn on notifications. Turn on all notifications so you don't miss anything each time we go. So you guys have a great week, and we'll see you on the other side. Peace.